Jonathan, the driver of an old truck, was struggling to make his way through the busy streets of the city. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and all he could think about was finishing his last 2 deliveries and heading home. But suddenly, something strange caught his attention. A large metal dumpster nearby seemed to be moving. What's this? A dumpster doesn't move on its own. Maybe there's an animal inside? Or, heaven forbid, a person? Jonathan thought, his heart starting to race. He sharply pulled over to the side of the road and stopped the truck. Ignoring the irritated honking from other cars, Jonathan climbed out of the cab and walked toward the dumpster. The heat was unbearable, and the stench of rotting garbage hit him in the face, but that didn't stop him. The dumpster was still moving, as if something inside was shifting around. As he got closer, Jonathan cautiously lifted the lid, bracing himself for the worst. To his horror, among the garbage bags, he saw a little girl, no older than 8. She was filthy, clutching a piece of stale bread in her hands, and her eyes, full of fear, were fixed on him. "Oh my God, it's a child," Jonathan thought. The girl sat there like a cornered animal, not moving and clearly ready to run at any sudden movement. "Hey there, don't be afraid. I won't hurt you," Jonathan spoke softly, trying not to scare her any further. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. The girl was silent for a long time, but eventually whispered Lily. This was the beginning of the story of how a kind truck driver tried to save a child found on the streets, only to realize there were far darker circumstances involved than he could have imagined. Jonathan soon understood that Lily's situation involved much more than just hunger and loneliness. Jonathan felt a deep sense of pity for the girl. She looked so vulnerable that his heart ached. He crouched down to be at her eye level. "Lily, are you here all alone? Where are your parents?" he asked, but the girl only gripped the piece of bread tighter, staring at him in silence. Realizing that she was too scared to trust a stranger, Jonathan decided to approach the situation carefully. "Listen, I know you must be really frightened, but I can help. I have real food in my truck. You must be hungry for something better than this," he said, extending a hand with a small packet of cookies that he always carried with him. "Here, take this. It's for you." Lily looked at him with suspicion, but the smell of fresh cookies seemed to catch her attention. She timidly reached out and took the packet, still watching him warily. Jonathan sighed with relief. This was the first step. "You can trust me, Lily. I just want to help. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up here?" he continued. The girl loosened her grip on the bread slightly, and after a pause, she finally spoke in a trembling voice, "My mom. She's really sick. It's just the 2 of us, and we don't have any food. I was trying to find something for her," she said, her voice trailing off, but Jonathan could sense the weight of the burden she carried. "Your mom is sick? Where is she now?" Jonathan asked, concern growing in his voice as he stood up. "At home. But I don't know. I don't know how she is," Lily's voice trembled. It was clear that she was trying hard to hold back her emotions. Jonathan knew he couldn't leave the girl alone. He started to form a plan in his head on how to help both of them. "All right, here's what we'll do. We'll go home and check on your mom. If she needs help, I'll take you both to the hospital, okay? You're not alone, Lily. We'll figure this out. Lily nodded, though fear still lingered in her eyes. Together, they walked to the truck, and Jonathan helped her into the passenger seat. As he started the engine, his thoughts were consumed by what could lie ahead. His instincts told him that this situation was more complicated than it appeared. On the way to Lily's home, Jonathan kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was racing with questions. How could such a small child end up in a dumpster, with her mother sick and without help? It didn't seem like just an unfortunate event. Something more serious was at play here. Finally, they arrived at an old, run-down building. The place looked like it could collapse at any moment, and just looking at it made Jonathan uneasy. Lily said nothing as they got out of the truck and approached the entrance. "Is this the place?" Jonathan asked, and Lily nodded, leading him inside. They climbed the creaky stairs to the 3rd floor, where Lily stopped in front of a door with no number. She pushed it open, and the door swung inward easily, as if it hadn't even been locked. What Jonathan saw inside shocked him. The room was nearly empty except for broken remnants of furniture scattered around in a mess. In the middle of the room, on a worn-out bed, lay a frail woman, Lily's mother. Jonathan immediately realized that the situation was far worse than he had imagined. Lily's mother was extremely thin, her breathing was shallow, and her face was ghostly pale. She barely opened her eyes when she heard footsteps, and in a weak, hoarse voice, she whispered, "Lily." "Mom!" The little girl cried and rushed to her bedside. "Oh no!" Jonathan muttered under his breath as he walked closer. "She needs medical help right away." Lily's mother struggled to lift her head, and her eyes reflected a mix of fear and despair. We can't. We don't have any money," she whispered faintly. Jonathan clenched his fists. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. He had to make a choice, one that could change not only their lives but his own as well. "We need to get your mother to the hospital immediately," Jonathan said to Lily, who was sitting beside her mother, clutching her hand tightly. "But how?" "We don't have any money," Lily whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Jonathan bit his lip, knowing she was right. In cases like this, medical help could be outrageously expensive, and it was clear they didn't have the means to pay for it. But leaving her in this state was unthinkable. He felt anger rising inside him at the unfairness of the situation. No child should have to go through this. No family should suffer like this. "Don't worry, Lily. I'll take care of it. The most important thing right now is saving your mom," Jonathan said firmly, though he wasn't sure himself where he'd get the money. He helped Lily's mother sit up, supporting her as she struggled to stay on her feet. It was clear she was too weak to walk on her own. Jonathan knew there was no time to waste. He had to act now. He led both the mother and daughter to his truck, gently laying the woman down on the back seat. Lily sat beside her, wrapping her arms around her as if trying to keep her from slipping away. As they drove to the hospital, Jonathan's mind was racing. He knew that without money, they would have almost no chance of getting the treatment Lily's mother needed. He realized he might have to go to extreme measures to find the funds. But time was running out. Her life depended on getting her to the hospital immediately. At the hospital, it was a busy night, even at such a late hour. Jonathan helped Lily and her mother out of the truck and rushed them inside. A young nurse at the reception desk looked at them with concern as they approached. "My mom? She's very sick," Lily said in a trembling voice, looking up at the nurse. "We'll take care of her," the nurse said quickly, noting the woman's frail condition. "What's her name?" "Amelia," Jonathan answered, but there was already anxiety in his voice. He knew the next question would be about money. As soon as the nurse took Amelia to one of the hospital rooms, a doctor approached Jonathan with a serious look on his face. "Her condition is very severe," the doctor began, looking directly at Jonathan. "She needs an immediate heart operation, but unfortunately, that kind of procedure is expensive. Do you have insurance or the means to pay?" Jonathan froze. This was the moment of truth. He looked at Lily, who was standing by the wall, trying to grasp what was happening. His heart ached at the thought that this little girl's life was hanging in the balance. He sighed and made a decision he couldn't take back. Pulling out his phone, he dialed a number he had hoped never to use. This person was his last resort, but the price of their help might be too steep. "Hello, Dominic." Jonathan's voice was shaky. "I need help. A large sum. Urgently." On the other end of the line, a cynical laugh echoed. "Jonathan, I haven't heard from you in a while. You know my help never comes for free, right?" "I know. And I'm ready for the terms," Jonathan said, feeling his heart clench. Dominic responded in a cold, calm voice. "There's a delivery I need you to make. Nothing too complicated, but it's better if you don't ask questions about what's in it. Deliver the cargo, and the money will be yours. But remember, Jonathan, if anything goes wrong, the consequences will be catastrophic." Jonathan knew he was trapped, but he had no other choice. He looked at Lily, and in that moment, he understood. For her and her mother, he would do anything, even if it meant dealing with criminals. "All right," he replied shortly. Leaving Lily with the nurse, Jonathan set off on his dangerous task. Jonathan drove through the empty streets of the city, heading to the location Dominic had given him. His mind was racing with troubling thoughts. What had he agreed to do? What would be in the cargo? But there was one feeling driving him. He couldn't let Lily and her mother down. His mission was to save them, no matter the cost. When he arrived at the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, his headlights revealed the dark silhouettes of two men standing at the gate. They looked stern and didn't ask any questions. One of them silently pointed to the back of the truck, signaling Jonathan to open it. Soon, several tightly sealed boxes were loaded into the truck's bed, and one of the men warned, "Don't open them. Don't look inside. Just deliver them to the address," one of them said, his voice cold as a winter wind. Jonathan gritted his teeth, nodded, and took the documents with the delivery address. He didn't know what was in those boxes, but he was sure it wasn't legal. As Jonathan set off on the road again, the stillness of the night felt oppressive. He kept checking his mirrors, expecting something to go wrong, as if someone was watching him or waiting to stop him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Thoughts of being caught spun around in his head. If that happened, the consequences would be dire, not just for him, but also for Lily and her mother. After driving for a few miles, he spotted police patrol cars with flashing lights up ahead. His heart pounded faster. Could they already know? What if they're on to me? Jonathan wondered, feeling cold sweat on his forehead. But the patrol cars passed by without stopping. He exhaled with relief, though the fear lingered. After several more hours of nerve-wracking driving through dark alleyways and deserted streets, Jonathan finally reached the destination, a rundown warehouse in an even more desolate part of town. A few men were waiting there, as silent and menacing as those who had loaded the cargo. "Leave the keys in the ignition and walk away," one of them said coldly, not bothering to look directly at Jonathan. He complied, not asking any questions, and in a matter of minutes, the cargo was unloaded as quickly as it had been packed. One of the men approached Jonathan and handed him an envelope filled with cash. "Here's your share. It's done. Now get out of here," the man said, with no hint of gratitude. Jonathan quickly got back into his truck and drove away, not wanting to stay a moment longer. In his hands was the money that would pay for Amelia's operation, but a deep unease gnawed at him. He had just crossed a line he never wanted to cross. On the way back to the hospital, Jonathan's thoughts were a whirlwind of anxiety. He knew that without the money, Amelia wouldn't survive, but now that he had the cash in his hands, it didn't feel like a victory. He had just done something dangerous, something that could have irreversible consequences. Still, he pressed on, knowing that saving Amelia was worth any risk. Finally, the hospital came into view, and Jonathan rushed inside. Lily was still sitting in the waiting area, her face lighting up when she saw him. She jumped to her feet, her small hands clasped in hope. "You're back," she whispered. Jonathan nodded, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm back, and I brought what we need to help your mom." They walked together to the front desk, and Jonathan handed over the money for Amelia's operation. The doctor, seeing that the necessary funds had been provided, quickly ordered the team to prepare for the surgery. As they wheeled Amelia into the operating room, Lily clung to Jonathan's hand, her grip tight, as though she feared she would lose him too. "You're going to save her, aren't you?" she whispered, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. Jonathan knelt down beside her and smiled gently. "I promised I'd help, and I won't let you down." Hours seemed to stretch endlessly as they waited for the surgery to end. Lily drifted in and out of sleep, her small head resting on Jonathan's shoulder, while Jonathan's thoughts kept returning to what he had done. He had saved Amelia's life, but at what cost to his own? When the doctor finally emerged from the operating room, Jonathan's heart stopped. The surgery was a success. "Amelia is going to recover," the doctor announced with a soft smile. A wave of relief washed over Jonathan, and Lily's face broke into a radiant smile as she leaped into his arms. "Thank you. Thank you so much," she cried, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. Jonathan hugged her tightly, feeling a mixture of joy and deep unease. Even though the surgery had gone well, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. His debt to Dominic loomed over him like a dark cloud. A few days later, Amelia was discharged from the hospital, and Jonathan helped her and Lily move into a modest, cozy apartment that he had arranged through some friends. The place wasn't large, but it was clean and, most importantly, safe. Lily was overjoyed, helping her mom unpack and decorate the new space with enthusiasm. Jonathan visited them every day, bringing groceries, helping them settle in, and becoming a pillar of support for their new life. But every time he returned home, the weight of what he had done to pay for Amelia's surgery pressed down on him. He knew that Dominic wouldn't let him walk away so easily. One evening, as Jonathan sat with Amelia and Lily in their new home, Lily proudly presented him with a drawing she had made. "Look, Mr. Jonathan, it's our new house, and this is you," she said excitedly. On the paper was a picture of a small, happy family, Amelia, Lily, and Jonathan, all standing together in front of their new home. The sight of the drawing tugged at Jonathan's heart. He realized that he had become more than just a savior to them. He had become part of their family. "It's beautiful, Lily." "Thank you," Jonathan said with a warm smile, though inside, he felt conflicted. As much as he wanted to protect them, he knew that his ties to Dominic put them at risk. He needed to find a way to escape the grip of the criminal world. A few days later, Jonathan's worst fear came true. His phone buzzed, and the screen lit up with Dominic's name. His heart sank as he answered. "Jonathan, I have another job for you." "Same place, same rules." "Be there in an hour," Dominic said coldly before hanging up. Jonathan gripped the phone tightly, his mind racing. He couldn't keep living like this, caught between helping a family that had come to mean so much to him and being drawn deeper into a life of crime. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the man he had become. "This has to end," he whispered to himself. Determined to break free, Jonathan drove to the warehouse and picked up the shipment as usual. But this time, he had a plan. Instead of delivering the cargo, he made several phone calls to old friends who had once worked in law enforcement. "I need help," Jonathan said gravely. "I'm involved with some dangerous people, and I want out." The voice on the other end responded cautiously, "Jonathan, you're in a risky situation. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes, I'm sure. I can't keep living like this." "Please help me," Jonathan pleaded. After a few moments of silence, the voice on the line agreed. Jonathan arranged to meet his contacts in a safe location where they would take the evidence from the cargo and start building a case against Dominic and his operation. A few nerve-wracking days passed. Jonathan waited anxiously, fearing every phone call would be Dominic finding out about his betrayal. But the call never came. His contacts assured him the investigation was underway, but it would take time. All Jonathan could do was hope that Dominic wouldn't come after him before the authorities moved in. One evening, as Jonathan sat with Amelia and Lily in their new home, his phone rang. This time, it was one of his former law enforcement friends. "Jonathan, we've got good news. Dominic and his associates have been arrested. They won't be able to touch you or anyone else anymore," the voice said. A wave of relief washed over Jonathan. He had finally broken free from Dominic's hold. "Thank you," Jonathan replied, feeling the tension that had gripped him for so long begin to lift. With Dominic out of the picture, Jonathan returned to Amelia and Lily, who could sense the change in his demeanor. "Is everything okay?" Amelia asked, her voice filled with concern. Jonathan smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "Yeah, everything's going to be just fine," he said with confidence. And in that moment, Jonathan realized that despite all the challenges he had faced, he had found something truly special, a family that he could protect and cherish. No one could take that away from him now.